So for the second straight season, the Clemson Tigers get it cranked up on opening night with a big-time affair against the Georgia Bulldogs, this time between the hedges in Sanford Stadium. We bring in Ryan Kantor of Shaking the Southland on the SB Nation platform to talk some Clemson football. We know, of course, for the last several years, Tosh Boyd has been the face of the program. He's gone. Cole Stout in, finally patiently waiting for his turn. Now as a senior, he gets the starting job, but as any quarterback's results usually are tied to the offensive front, the offensive line, and there are a number of questions there. Ryan, can you kind of address a number of your X factors, and we'll start along the offensive line.
Yeah, so the offensive line coming into fall camp was a very big question mark. We weren't sure who was going to play where. We knew Ryan Norton was most likely going to be the center, although even that he could have possibly moved to a guard position. But now things are starting to solidify a little bit. So one of our biggest X factors from about a month or two ago that we wrote about was Joe Gore. And he's had a very good summer. He's had a very good fall camp so far. He weighed in at 283 pounds, and Shaq Anthony, his competition at right tackle, is suspended from the Georgia game. He weighed in at 276. And so there's a lot of positive feedback about Joe Gore right now. The coaches are quote, comfortable with him. So that's really encouraging for offensive line. We have Isaiah Battle at the other tackle position, who's considered the best offensive lineman on the roster. So that we don't have a lot of depth at tackle, but that's starting to shore up a little bit. So we feel confident that we have some semblance of where things are going to go. We've now heard that Kalon Davis will start. They're not sure exactly where. You would think one of the guard positions, but he could possibly still move to a tackle. We'll see. But to have Kalon Davis now step up, that's another big positive for the offensive line. And then one of our X factors was Eric McLean, and he and Tyrone Crowder battling for that last position at the offensive guard. And Tyrone Crowder got down to 322 pounds, which is more playable weight for him. He was a lot heavier last season. He's a redshirt freshman, and people are very, very encouraged by him. He's a really big, strong guy, and so that's how the offensive line is starting to build out. Not a lot of depth, but it's nice to see that it's starting to build out, and those X factors are hitting positively where they need to hit. So that's encouraging.
Sammy Watkins, no X factor, one of the most productive and talented wide receivers in college football over the last 3 years. I think from a national perspective, we got a chance to see late in the season, and specifically against Ohio State, how talented Martavis Bryant was, and probably underachieved for his career there at Clemson. So there might be some production, though, to replace those two sets of shoes, not necessarily from the wide receiver position, but from the tight end position.
Yes, Jordan Leggett, who received a lot of negative media last year when he admitted that he was lazy in practice. He got suspended from the Georgia Tech game. He's really seemed to mature, and that's really encouraging because he has such a high ceiling as a player. He weighed in at 251, which is hopeful. Makes me hopeful that he will be a good blocker, which has always been a problem. We had rave reviews from him during spring. We're getting great reviews from him now in fall camp. He's catching touchdowns from Cole Stout in seemingly every practice. So it's becoming, we weren't even sure he was going to be the starting tight end, but it sounds like he's starting to pull away. We know he has the highest ceiling, and with, like you said, Watkins and Bryant gone, he could be a major touchdown guy along with Mike Williams, who can catch those fade routes and be a big factor in that Clemson offense, especially with a new quarterback.
And that's a great point that you make. We expect a lot of these guys when they step on campus, but let's look back to our college years. There's a lot of growth that can happen between 18 and 21 years old. If we look at the defense, Ryan, it's almost a flip the script, or we shall see how it plays out, in that this defense was a bit of a mess a couple years ago and carried by the offense. The defense played extremely well most of last season. Vic Beasley, of course, the star on defense, and I think much of that credit would have to go to new defensive coordinator over the last couple years, Brent Venables, and a lot less missed tackles and blown coverages in the secondary, but some of those guys that made plays in the secondary and on that entire defense from last season gone.
Yeah, so starting up front, I think the defensive line could be one of the very best in the entire nation. So hard to pin down the single X factor there, as if one guy goes down, like Corey Crawford, you have another guy right there to fill in. But scooting back a little bit to the linebackers, we have Travis Blanks. He was a safety last season, tore his ACL versus the Citadel, and now he's at this nickelback position where he started his career, his college career, that is. And he's gone to the coaches and said he's not 100%, and maybe he should redshirt. So that's going to be an interesting position there, the nickelback spot. We have Dorian O'Daniel, T.J. Burrell, Corin Wiggins. They'll be competing if Travis Blanks does, in fact, redshirt. So that'll be really interesting. Luckily, they have some depth despite losing both outside linebackers who started last season.
So one other question here, Ryan, because this is a bit of a season preview here as we go through the personnel. If you take Clemson and put them in any other division in college football, even though they wouldn't be the favorite to win the division, they would be a heavy contender. But, of course, because of the big challenge standing in their way, having to play in Florida State's division, most likely the best team in the country, what are your expectations? And also, since you've got the beat on the fans' expectations, what is expected out of this football team this year?
Good question. So I've talked to 8 other writers across SB Nation. We've actually broke down the schedule and looked at how many games we should expect to win. I project about 9. When we average across all the different writers, it was coming out to about 8.5. So that's about where the over-under is, 8.5 games. You look at Florida State as a likely loss, and then between Georgia, South Carolina, and the entire rest of the schedule, you figure 2, maybe even a third loss. I said 2, a lot of others said 3. So 8-4, 9-3, something like that. Beating Florida State to win the actual division and then the conference, especially in Tallahassee, seems extremely prohibitive.
And it's a really tough schedule. The Georgia game again, and now on the road, South Carolina at the end of the season, 2 of the tougher non-conference games in all of college football. Then again, yeah, Florida State, probably the best team in all the land. And then you throw in Louisville in the mix in Clemson's division, so it's an extremely difficult schedule. All right, we got Ryan Kantor back on Shaking the Southland on the SB Nation platform, so catch his work there. Ryan, we thank you for the information and the insight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.